A guy walks into a bar with his dog. They both walk up to the bar stool and sit down. The owner orders a couple of beers, and the bartender just frowns and says, "Look, buddy, you can't have any dog sitting at the bar." The owner retorts, "Hey, listen, this is no ordinary dog." Well, the bartender doesn't budge and tells the guy to leave. The owner says, "Look, this is no ordinary dog. This is a talking dog." The bartender says, "Yeah, right, buddy. Why don't you and your talking dog get out of here?" The owner says, "Okay, fine, listen. I'll go to the bathroom and you can talk to my dog while I go. If you still want us to leave when I get back, we will." So the owner leaves, and the dog and the bartender start talking it up like they're long lost friends. Bartender starts to really like the dog. They're talking about sports and beer and women. So the bartender comes up with an idea. He turns to the dog and says, "Look, I got a friend who owns a bar across the street. If I give you $20, will you go into that bar and order a beer from him?" The dog says, "No problem." He gets up and leaves. Well, the owner comes back and asks where his dog is. The bartender explains the joke. So the owner leaves to go get his dog. Well, right out of the bar, the owner sees his dog in a back alley with a lady dog. The owner says, "Hey, what are you doing? I've never seen you do this before." And the dog replies, "Honestly, dude, I've never had $20 before." A guy walks into an antique shop and admires a beautiful lion's head mounted on the wall. "What a great trophy," says the guy. "Well, I wouldn't call it great," says the shopkeeper. "That damn lion killed my wife." "Oh my word," says the man. "Were you guys on safari? What happened?" "No," says the guy. "The screws actually came loose. Fell on her head." A guy was sitting in an airport lounge when the guy next to him says, "So, what do you do, buddy?" And he says, "Well, I'm a danceologist. I've studied every dance in the entirety of Europe." "Well, even the Wingle Wango?" "Mm-hmm," he says. "What about the Yapuja Dance?" "Wait, I've never heard of that one. Tell me about it." Well, the guy says, "I can't tell you about it, but my cousin, he lives in Switzerland. Here's the address." So he handed him a business card, and the danceologist thanked him and booked a flight for Switzerland. When he arrived at the airport, the cousin greeted him and took him home. "Every year on the 12th of May, he says, they do this dance. You see that mountain up there? They live on top. They'll be doing it in 2 weeks." Well, the danceologist looked at the mountain in awe. 2 weeks later, there he was in a heavy storm, jagged rocks and icy winds battering him. He climbed and climbed. He had to take quite a few breaks, but he finally made it with one last push up the mountain. When there he saw the tribe leader. "Aha," he says. "Is this where the Yapuja dance is done?" "Ah, yes, you're just in time," said the chief. "Are we all ready?" Well, all the other tribesmen got into a big circle and nodded. Well, the danceologist watched intently. Finally, they began. "All right, everybody. You put your left foot in." A gray goose walks into a bar and says, "I'd like a scotch on the rocks." Well, the bartender looks at the goose funny, but goes and gets him a drink anyways. The bartender continues to look at the gray goose, and the goose says, "Hey, what's your deal? Why do you keep looking at me like that?" The bartender says, "You mean beside the fact that you're a talking gray goose? Well, I actually have a drink named after you." Well, the gray goose says, "Wait a minute. You got a drink named Steve?" A guy goes into a pet store to get an unusual pet and walks out with a centipede in a shoebox. Well, once he gets home, the guy decides he wants to take the centipede down to his local tavern and show his drinking buddies. So he taps on the box and says, "Hey, you want to head down to the tavern with me for a cocktail?" There's no answer from the centipede. Well, he waits a couple more moments and then says, "Hey, how about you and me going to the tavern?" Again, there's no answer. Well, thinking the centipede can't hear him, the man goes right up to the box and yells, "Hey, you want to go down to the bar and have a drink?" A little voice comes out of the box. "Dude, I heard you the first time. I'm putting on my shoes." A man walks into a bar and he has a pet octopus. He sits down at the bar and says to the bartender, "Hey, give us 2 beers over here." And the bartender walks over and sees the octopus and says, "Didn't you see the sign over there? It says no pets allowed." The man says to the bartender, "Well, you don't understand. This is a special octopus. He can play any musical instrument that you have." The bartender says, "Well, I'll tell you what. If he can play any instrument, you can both drink for free all night." The bartender walks up to the band playing and grabs a guitar. He puts it down on the bar, and the octopus crawls up on the bar, feels around the guitar for a little while, then finally picks it up and starts jamming. He's so good, he sounds like Jimi Hendrix. The crowd goes wild. Well, the bartender's amazed and says, "All right, let's try one more." Well, this time he goes in the back room and brings out a dusty old set of bagpipes and puts them on the bar. "Let's see him play this." Well, the octopus starts crawling all over the bagpipes. He continues this for quite some time, and the bartender shouts, "See, I knew he couldn't play all these instruments." The man says, all right, just give him a couple of more minutes. As soon as he figures out he can't get its pajamas off and hook up with it, he'll play it." A guy was having a drink in a dark bar and he leans over to a woman next to him and says, "Hey, you want to hear a funny blonde joke?" Well, the woman replies, "Well, before you tell that joke, you should probably know something. I'm blonde, I'm 6 foot and 210 pounds. I'm a professional triathlete and a bodybuilder." The blonde woman next to me, she's 6'2", 220. She's an ex-pro wrestler. Next to her, that's a blonde. She's 6'5", weighs 230. She's a professional kickboxer. Now, buddy, you still want to tell that blonde joke? The guy thinks about it for a second and says, "No, not if I'm going to have to explain it 3 times. A guy walks into his local tavern and he's carrying a dog with him. He puts the dog in the bar and announces that the dog can talk and that he's got $100 willing to bet anybody who says he can't. Well, the bartender quickly takes the bet and the owner looks at the dog and says, "All right, what's that thing on top of the building that keeps the rain from coming inside?" Well, the dog answers, "Roof." The bartender says, "What, are you kidding? I'm not paying for that." The dog owner says, "All right, how about double or nothing? I'll ask him something else." The bartender agrees, and the owner turns to the dog and says, "Who is the greatest baseball player of all time?" Well, the dog answers, "Ruth." Well, with that, the bartender picks them both up and throws them out the door. Well, as they bounce on the sidewalk, the dog looks up at the owner and says, "Was it DiMaggio?" Hey folks, it's Eddie here. If you could do me a favor, leave me a comment below. Which one of these jokes was your favorite? Thanks, and we'll catch you next time.